These are the people who I want to appeal to. Make those little slips. It happens. You have to have a plan, ability to manage your problems effectively. How are you going to do it? Fall off the horse? Jump right back on.
And welcome back. And as I mentioned, we are officially having our first Bruk It Down Miss Jenny session for 2016. You have to do a dance too. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Marlene. Good morning, Belize.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Of course, this is very early in the year and we've been talking a lot about resolutions. Do you have any that you are going to embark on?
No, you know I don't do resolutions. I do goals. I set goals.
You set goals, yeah. There's a lot of pressure sometimes by some people to stick to resolutions.
Right. To me, I don't know. I guess for me, resolutions are it's almost like flippant. Mm-hmm. You make the resolutions because it's a new year and it's a new beginning and everything. Mm-hmm. But just last night, I had someone come up to me and say that they had already broken their resolution. And she said that her resolution was to tackle procrastination because she says that she spends a lot of time on the internet, on social media. And it was cutting into her work time, into her family time and all this. And already on the 7th, she said she's already broken it and gotten, she said once she opens up her computer, you know, the first thing that comes on is the internet. And she's she's got all these messages. And once she gets onto that, then everything else gets put on the side. And she's having to stay work late to get caught up because she spends all this time answering things on the internet. So this is why I say it's best to set goals, because with something like that, if you're tackling procrastination, you would have to say, okay, when I plan ahead, you know, when I get to work, first of all, don't have it open up on the internet. Have it open to your work page or where you're going to be working. Set goals the night before about what you want to get done that following day. Do those things. So if you're working on procrastination, it's really important to actually write things down every day, what you want to accomplish for the day, and tick them off. So that's a better thing to do than saying, well, I'm going to do a resolution for
I hear what you're saying. It's more than just resolving to quit or start something. Which is very broad. It's like action plan. You make a step-by-step process that you'll go through, cutting down, cutting back, increasing with realistic. I remember we talked about the SMART goals a couple of years ago.
It's so important that you actually do this step by step. And I'll tell you something else too that's really important about resolutions. You know, you're talking about change, and change is a process. Change doesn't happen like poof because you want it. We have to know where we are or where somebody else is in that stage of change. Because if I'm saying, okay, I resolved to do this, but really and truly I'm still in the denial stage, pre-contemplation stage, I'm not really going to do anything. And so it's really important to know where I am in the stage of change so that then I can go get help or talk to somebody or do something about moving myself forward.
In fact, that's one of the things, before we move into our first question, we perhaps haven't talked about. With some of the major changes that people want to make, it's okay to seek out a counselor to assist you in coming up with a plan, right?
Absolutely. It's goal planning. Goal planning. It's not something that we generally do here. And so it's really important to start. That's a habit you'd want to start. You know, of coming in and setting goals for things you want to do. Have lists, have action plans, have things that and check them off. Right? So that you know what you've done or what you haven't accomplished for the day, and you put those on your to-do list for tomorrow.
You know. Well, we just got some additional advice for setting our goals for the new year as well. All right, well, let's get moving into our questions for today. And our first question, let's start off with that. Good morning, Jenny. My son was recently murdered, cut down like a dog in the street. He did not die right away. He fought to stay alive, but his injuries were too serious and he later died. But to add insult to injury, Guess how my daughter in LA got the news? Some inconsiderate person posted RIP on Facebook while he was still fighting for his life. He was not dead yet when they put this up on Facebook. Here I was dealing with the death of my only son, and my daughter is angry with me because I did not prepare her. And she got the news in a really shocking way. She called me screaming, and all her anger was aimed at me. She's still angry that I let her find out in the cold, hard-hearted manner. Jenny, maybe people just want to be the first with news, but they need to try to consider other people's feelings, or worse yet, their health. My daughter could have had a heart condition. I noticed that the media has become better about holding names until families have been informed. But how do we get these people using FB to learn to be more considerate? How do I appeal to their sense of right and wrong and tell them to be more sensible with this awful weapon? This gives a lot of people a lot of power to really hurt families. Any ideas? I think I can't really grieve because I'm so angry.
The anger is a part of the grieving process.
Yeah.
That's a part of it. You know, we have stages. She's in that stage of it by virtue of everything that has happened to her. So she is grieving. The thing is, though, the whole issue of people taking the pictures and putting it on Facebook. Everybody wants to be first to put stuff on Facebook. And we've talked about this. We've talked about this previously, you know, on the show, where we have folks. A good example recently was the thing at the hostel. A lot of people were there holding their phones up, taking pictures. Everywhere where there's an accident or something, people take out their cameras rather than rendering assistance. They take out the cameras to be the first with the pictures to put on Facebook. And I think what she's asking here is, how do we get the word out to all these people who use their cameras first?
Yeah.
And get news out, be the first to give the news. I remember.
I mean, I can't imagine what our daughter went through with opening up your Facebook and finding out, or being told your brother has died when he hasn't, in fact.
Right.
I mean, I think that's everybody's worst nightmare.
Right. And then that's a displaced anger because she's angry at her mom rather than being angry at the persons who put it on Facebook.
Yeah.
But what this does, I mean, it adds a secondary level of pain to all this.
Yeah.
It's secondary victimization of the people who are already grieving, you know. It's really, really sad that we are in this sort of a thing now.
Yeah.
I guess all I can say to the general public is, if you have to rush to get a picture of things, at least hold off on putting it on Facebook until the families can be notified. I see accidents, you know, people find out before the media puts a name out, because I know the media has now waited till they've informed families.
But we do wait until we know that the families have been informed.
Yeah.
For the very same reason that you don't want a family member to find out about anything of this nature on our news site.
Right. I remember a couple of years ago in Belmopan, there was this young man who was in an accident and was killed. And somebody picked up the phone and called the mother, who died of a heart attack right then and there when they called her. And both were buried together, simply because people couldn't wait to pass on news. And we come from a culture of gossip, you know, the shush. And now it's taken to a new level with the camera on these phones. Really and truly, in answer to this lady, I would just like, you know, to point out to the public that compassion, empathy, think about what it would be like for you, were that your son, your brother, your father, that something happened to and you found out on Facebook, or somebody called you and said, this is on Facebook, or call you telling you condolences, and you haven't even heard that there was something wrong yet. There's something really, really wrong with that.
Is this, and there's a larger issue here, and I think it's about how technology has shaped our means of communication, and what it is that drives us to put what we put when we put it online. And I always explain to people, there is no privacy. It doesn't matter the amount of friends you have. It doesn't, when I speak with young people, that's one of the first messages I get out to them. There is no private setting. Once another person can see it, it is no longer private. And that other person, normally it's never just one, has access to be able to share it with whoever they choose.
And it's there in perpetuity.
Yes, a screenshot, anything can take place, and that can go anywhere. And we've seen it so much. But my question has to do with, is this human nature, that a part of human nature, that we want to have this information and be the first to share and acquire a number of views, a number of likes? Or is it just a part of the evolution that has come with technology?
I think I don't know, I can only talk really about here where I'm observing this. You know, once upon a time it used to be like we were news brokers. Yeah. You know, I have the goods, I have the news before anybody else. And then you go shush and tell this one and get more information from that one to share with that one and bring back that one. You know, people who talk about the same dog that takes a bone brings back a bone, right? Well, back then, growing up, it was by gossip by mouth. Well, that still happens. They now have a bigger weapon. Yeah. And in a culture where we like that kind of thing, it thrives. And now it's really gotten out of proportion, I believe, when we don't even respect people's. I don't want to say, you know, it's the feelings. It's not just the privacy. Yeah. It's the feelings and the lack of caring for or I didn't want to say lack of caring, not thinking even. You know? Well,
that brings it back, and that was the second point I wanted to make. Whether or not this is just a part of our human nature that we want to get information and get it out, and there's lots of studies now talking about how people's self-esteem and validation is linked to likes and views and number of followers. And that's a rising trend that we'll have to be realistic about, especially with young people. But secondary, or maybe even primary to that, is the question of empathy. And empathy, as we often try to do, we have to distinguish between feeling sorry for somebody and identifying with somebody. Is this a skill set that perhaps we've lost sight of when we talk about our interactions on social media?
We've lost sight of it. We have lost sight.
Let's break it down. How does one work on building their own empathy, and why is it important?
See, I don't even know if you can teach empathy. I honestly don't know.
I mean, can we take a moment to pause and say, if I was in their shoes, would I want this done to me? That's for me.
But you know, unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are narcissists. And when I say a narcissist, these are people who really don't care about other people under themselves. And if I only care about me, I can't have empathy for you or what you're going through. Because how can you look at somebody whose son has been murdered, whether they're in a gang or not? That's somebody's child. And when the mother is crying, how can we look and say, oh, well, you should keep your child, you should teach her that or whatever? Instead of saying, oh, wow, poor woman. I'm so sorry that her son got killed. Right? But we have lost that. Or I don't know if we ever had it. That's a problem for some folks. You know? Empathy, and honestly, the thing with this right here, before you send that picture off, before you put it on Facebook, think about what that would have felt like for you, where that your brother, your sister, your parent, that was lying on the ground. And a lot of times they get these pictures, and I mean the most uncompromising, the most horrible place that a person could be, the lowest point. Somebody said, you know, in Belize, we when people are down, we like to kick them. And I mean, that's a horrible thing to think that we have become like that. But honestly, when you look at some of these, you wonder if it's not true.
So what would you say to people in terms of, as a mental health professional, what do you say to people about perhaps even, we don't talk about resolutions, but what about observing and analyzing their behavior when online? What do you say to them about adapting a form of empathy and understanding that essentially privacy does not exist when it comes to the internet?
Oh, Lord. You just said it. You just said it. People, I honestly think that people need to understand Facebook and these other things, that there is no privacy, especially young people. You know, once you put it there, it's there forever. Once you put it there, it is there forever. So really and truly, it's so important that be careful what you put out there. And see, the written word is so different from what you say. So when you put something there and you put some comment on there also, right? Can you think about the hurt that you're inflicting on the other person, whose relative this is? Now this lady right here, I just want to say, you are going through the grieving process.
The anger is part of grief.
Right, but the thing is to ask her to be careful about not being stuck at anger. The other phases we want you to go through, you'll be going through the depression more than likely, and she's probably there too, because now she has a dead son and an angry daughter. So I'm sure that she is right now also in the depression stage. But ultimately where we want her to get is to the point where she's in acceptance, and that's not saying I accept that my son was murdered and my daughter was angry, but coming to the stage that this has happened, where do I go to from here? How do I grow from this? How do I move on? That's what acceptance is that I can go on living and without my son and try to make amends, you know, renew relationships with my daughter so that I can then move on, both of us.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
it's a tough one.
Yeah,
it's a tough one.
I think, as you mentioned, there are not added layers in addition to having your son murdered, which is bad enough.
And really to the public, for God's sake, when you come up on something, render assistance first before you grab the camera. Try to help before you grab the camera. Everybody can't stand around taking pictures while people are dying. You stop and there's a car turned over, you stop, there's a fire going on. Run in and help, and then grab the camera if you have to grab the camera. But don't grab the camera first and leave people to die.
All right. So we're going to get moving now into our second question. I think that's a tough one, and I'm sure as the year continues, we'll continue to have more social media questions and issues popping up, because they seem to be quite the norm. All right, so the second question goes like this. Jenny, hope you don't mind. I feel sad today. I was in the bus terminal and I witnessed something that made my head hurt. I watched this man who was clearly under the influence with his wife and 3 children. One child was a teenage girl and the other 2 were toddlers, one about a year old. He kept calling the teenager stupid in front of all the people waiting. Not sure what she had done to deserve all that, but she looked so ashamed, and he kept cussing both the girlfriend, wife, and the teenager, using the F word to the baby, who was now crying, and shoving the woman in the back of her head. Can you imagine what he must do to them at home? The sad thing was that nobody said a word. I was afraid if I said something, he might do worse to her when they got home. None of the men standing there said anything either. I wonder what they were thinking. And you know, not one policeman in sight when you need one. Is there anything I could have done? I feel so badly now that I was too afraid to do something.
Well,
Yeah. What would you do, Jenny?
Let me just say this. You can't take on someone who's under the influence because they're unreasonable.
Point, yes.
They are unreasonable. They're under the influence. So there's, you take them on, you're just likely to probably get hurt yourself. And obviously with everybody else standing around, nobody's helping her. and you take that on, you're asking for problems. So I guess I want to just say to her, don't feel badly. Under the circumstances, there really was nothing you could have done since he was under the influence. However, if that woman happens to be hearing us now, I would hope that she would do something about that. You know, that's domestic violence, I'm sorry. And it's not just domestic violence, it's not just abuse of the woman. It's also abuse of the teenager, and it's abuse of the other children, the ones who are watching and the ones who are suffering from this abusive behavior.
It's verbal abuse and physical, because he was shoving her head.
Yeah, physical too. And a lot of times, you know, people don't see it as abuse because, well, maybe it's only when he's drunk he behaves like this. And so we minimize things, but it's really important not to minimize that kind of behavior. I'm saying this to women in general, really important not to minimize that kind of behavior.
I think you bring up a very valid point. Actions that take place when somebody is intoxicated, especially when they are abusive or borderline abusive, that don't take place when somebody is sober. What does a person do? I mean, is it still get out of the situation as fast as possible?
Well, you don't necessarily...
Because we hear women say that so often. It's only when he drinks he behaves like that.
But you see, this is the latent, that anger is still there. That comes out when he's drinking. Because remember, the alcohol now numbs your thinking abilities and all that, right? But the anger is still there.
So in other words, the actions wanted to be done a long time, and the alcohol just allows you to...
It gives you freedom to do that kind of stuff. So when he's sober, you need to talk to him about getting help and make some decisions. Let him know what the consequences are going to be. Now, if you're living in a domestic violence situation where he hits you when he's drunk or not, then you really need to be thinking about what you're going to do and get out of that. And that's the only time that I really and truly tell women, you need to make sure that you get the heck out of that situation, right? If there's abuse there, there's and unless he comes in and he's working and he's seriously working on taking control of his anger and doing something about it, you don't need to be staying in that. You don't. You oughtn't.
And if we're to break down some of the other issues, having a parent curse a teenager or even a one-year-old child should not be something that is condoned by any other parent.
And that's the other thing. A lot of times women stay in relationships because of the children. They'll tell you, well, I don't want my child to be growing up without a mother and a father, and they love their dad, and it's only when he's drinking, you know. The thing is what are you teaching those children? What are you teaching that baby? What is that baby learning by watching you two, mother and father, interact? And he sees his dad cursing his mom or pushing her around. And I would assume that it's worse when they're not in public. Honestly, I'm sorry. But what is that baby learning? And the teenager, what has she internalized? She's a girl, you know? She is learning from her mom, who is not doing anything, that I'm supposed to be docile and accepting of this kind of behavior. And so that's the kind of men that she's going to be gravitating towards. You see?
I think you've said that before, that children learn the type of partners or relationships that they want based on what they see,
what they experience
taking place in front of them. So she learns that it's okay for your partner to shove your head, or for a male to curse you out.
Curse you out, exactly. She's internalized that. And as a teenager, she already has that. That's where she's comfortable. So don't be surprised if when she gets a mate, she's going to select a man who is just like this man, unfortunately. But that's what she knows, that's where she's comfortable. So that's where she's going to go.
And final point in this. We have clearly established that because he's intoxicated, in terms of safety, the observer could not do anything.
There was nothing you could have done.
But if the person is not intoxicated and you see behavior that is abuse, clearly abuse, verbal or physical, should you intervene?
If I'm a woman, I don't think I would intervene. I would try to find the police. Or at the very least, if I could get that woman's phone number or something so that I could pass it on to women's departments, something else that you can do without intervening. Because you don't want to become a victim also out there. And if it's, if it's a male person and they're bigger than you are, you could become a victim.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if the men in that place had decided to step up and say, okay, enough of this, stop, that would have been different. But as a woman,
depending on your strength,
you don't want to do that.
And if you see a parent cursing out a child,
no, you can gently say, you know what, please not here.
Gently.
No, but you don't want to start a ruckus in front of the child. Again, you don't want to intimidate the child any further, right? But clearly, and especially like neighbors who know this kind of thing is going on, report it. You have the Human Development has a 0800 number. For heaven's sake, report it. Because it starts as verbal abuse, but it grows, it develops, and it gets worse.
Okay. So I think we have a little bit of time to do the last question. So we'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. Okay. Make we talk about favoritism in our families. I know the parents like to say that they don't have favorites, but they do. Let me tell you, Jenny, they do. Especially, I think they like the boys more. But let me tell you what brought this up. I was sitting next to a young girl, I would guess around 19, at BTL Park, and she had 2 children with her. She had one cute little boy in her arms who she kissed and cuddled and played with. However, she kept yelling at the little girl and scolding her for being careless because she kept messing herself up with a meat pie. Now, Jenny, who gave her the meat pie? I'm an adult and I could mess myself up with a meat pie if I'm not careful. So that was uncalled for. Anyway, some gravy fell on her shirt. She hit the little girl and told her to grow up. Now, this baby could not have been more than 3 years old, maybe. Anyway, that quickly, she turned her right around and cooed lovingly to the little boy. What message is she sending to that baby girl? How does that baby girl feel? The children were obviously both hers, but they did not look alike, none at all. I think for 2 different men. This poor child, can you say something about this whole favoritism thing, please? And I hope she and other mothers are listening. Thank you for such a spirited question, but wow, well.
You had your head down. I'm looking at the body language in the room. And the men in the room clearly disagree that there's favoritism for the boys.
Oh, there's no favoritism? But there's favoritism among children. Ah, we got some blanks there. So I think that's a yes. So what do we say to that?
As mothers, I'm sorry, I think that mothers do have favorites. And really in Belize, there's a son thing, let's face it. They love their sons, girl. Love their sons. And yes, they love the girls, but the sons are the kings. They're the princes. But clearly, seriously, this baby, it's so important that mothers treat both children with the same love and the same caring, because you don't want to send messages to either child that any of the children are more special than the other ones, because it messes up their self-esteem. They are going to grow up with self-esteem issues, and you'll have behavioral problems behind that. You're going to have all kinds of other things that we can't go into with the short space of time that we have. Maybe we could continue this.
So acknowledge that there can be favoritism that takes place. There can be, but perhaps not. I would imagine it's not on purpose. They're not.
It's not. And parents tend to love the younger ones because those are the ones they have to put their time with. So I don't know that it's
of the family.
Yeah, I don't know that.
I have some siblings that would agree.
I don't know that it's just because it's a little boy, but that's a baby.
And just very quickly, because our producer is telling us we're completely out of time. The issue of how we socialize boys and girls. That's one of the things I see here. Yes. The girl is to take care of herself, and the boy must be coddled because I am the female and I take care of men.
Yes, and that's in Belize, girl. Let's face it. We train our girls that you're supposed to take care of the boys. and we take care of them all the way through life. You know, that's a Belizean thing. Or I should say it's a Caribbean thing. It's not just in Belize. Okay. We socialize our boys, basically, that the girls are supposed to clean up after you. They're the princes. I know that the guys don't agree with me, but that's the reality. We all do it. Yeah. And it's something that we need to change because it's not fair to the girls. Yeah. When we socialize girls that they're supposed to be, you know, catered to men, that's what we get. Yeah. That's what we get in our relationships later on in life. I really would like us to come back to that next time we meet. Yeah, we can. And we can touch on the socialization issue too. It's unfair to men too when they're grown and can't even cook for themselves. Can't cook for themselves, exactly.
So I think there's several issues there. I probably touched a bit of chords there, but I'll leave it at that. That was we had some great questions today. Remember, if you have questions that you'd like to submit to Miss Jenny, of course, they're all anonymous. And if you want to change some of the locations, you can as well. We just want to address the core issues in these questions. You can send them to us on our Open Your Eyes Facebook page in a private message, and we'll tackle them the next time we have Ms. Jenny here as well. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Alrighty.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about picking up art as a new hobby. So stay tuned.
These are the people who I want to appeal to. Make those little slips. It happens. You have to have a plan to manage your problems effectively. How are you going to do it? Fall off the horse? Jump right back on.